Okay. Hi, I'd like to start by welcoming everyone and thank you for being here today with us today. My name is Allison Payne, and I'm the staff liaison to the ACRL Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee. I just want to give everyone a heads up and let you know that today's session is being recorded and that we'll post a recording on ACRL's YouTube channel and link to it from ACRL's website. Please make sure that your chat box is set to go to all presenters and attendees and add any questions you have throughout the presentation. We will be monitoring the chat and we will answer those questions at the end of the session. I'd like to thank today's panelists today, who include Wanda K. Brown, who is the Director of Library Services at the C.G.O. Kelly Library at Winston-Salem State University, Marcela Isuster, who is the Liaison Librarian and Digital Scholarship Hub Coordinator at McGill University in Montreal, Canada, Derrick Jefferson, who is a member of the library faculty and associate librarian at American University in Washington, D.C. And last but not least, Curtis Small, who is the associate librarian and coordinator of public services for the Special Collections Department at the University of Delaware Library, Museum, and Press. Finally, I'd like to let you know that this free webcast and ACRL's other free professional development opportunities are made possible in part by your ACRL membership, which helps fund many of our programs and services for the academic and research library community. Not a member? Join today, join nearly 10,000 of your colleagues and become a member today. Visit ala.org/ACRL/membership for more information. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to our panelists. Please feel free to start when you're ready.
Great, thank you very much for that introduction, Allison. So this is an event that is being brought to you by the ACRL EDI committee. And the content of this webinar is essentially all wrapped up in the name of it. We're going to be covering an insider's guide to preparing for promotion, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And all of the panelists that we have here have had a variety of experience in actually preparing for promotion. So we'll hear from those both at the beginning of this process and those that have quite a lot more experience. You probably noticed you had some opportunity to be able to insert your questions when you were registering for this. So we will start out by answering a handful of those questions, kind of taking what has been submitted and looking at the larger issues. So I'll be starting out by asking each of the panelists a question. They will respond to those questions in turn. And then at the end of it, we hope that we will have an opportunity to be able to respond to your questions that you put into chat. So this is going to be a very interactive kind of session. We expect that it will be quite casual. So please feel free to interject any questions that you have along the way. And we will get started first with the first question that I have is for Wanda. So Wanda, this is the question for you. Can you describe the various promotion structures that are common in academic libraries? What is the purpose and what are their benefits and drawbacks? This is where we can get into some of the good, bad, and ugly of holding a position that is required to participate in one of those systems.
Thank you, Mary Beth. So I thought I'd start out by saying actually what a status is. So some of it is tenured, which means it is an academic appointment that may come with a security of a lifetime, but it may also come with security for a set defined number of years. So some people call it tenure and it's up or out. Some people call it tenure that it's up and you can stay at a certain level and don't have to move up any further. Some call it academic status, but mostly it's a kind of job security that allows you to take advantage of the things I think you're already doing, such as publishing, such as presenting, such as serving on committees and giving back to the profession to which you are in. And so in some cases, people see it as the good. So what's the good? The good is you are indeed giving back to your profession. You are probably engaged in some type of research. You are probably working at presenting or serving in some capacity. And for a lot of us, this is what we do naturally. So I would say that's the good. The good is on some campuses, it gives you the same status as the teaching faculty on that campus, which comes with a level of security, but also comes with the fact that you can serve on university committees and you can be on university, regarded at the same. So you're attending faculty meetings and staff meetings, et cetera. But also, so those are some of the pluses. The main plus, I think, for people is the kind of job security that people seem to have from it. So like in North Carolina, where Mary Beth and I live, this is a at-will state, right? So as an at-will state, you can be let go at will, right? Just whenever. But when you have a kind of academic status or tenure, then you have to like break one of the golden rules or whatever that they have that was defined around it before you can be let go. So I think those are all the good. Some people see the bad in that they're stressed, say they don't work in a profession, in a part of the library that's engaged in research necessarily, or they don't enjoy doing research, or they don't enjoy teaching and they just want to be out of the limelight. So for some people, it is a level of stress. For some people, it's a level of stress because of what we're going to talk about today, some of the things that are involved in going up for appointment or reappointment or being defined, as academic eligible or ineligible. So some of that is kind of stressful, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. But typically people are evaluated in like 3 areas. It's probably teaching, it's probably research, and it's probably service. And so for most of us, or for a lot of us, I think these are things that we enjoy doing. But if you don't enjoy doing them, then it can be kind of seen as part of that ugly. I think personally, if I could give my own personal opinion, I think that it allows for continued growth. Sometimes in certain positions you get in, you can kind of get burnt out in that position. And if you're kind of in a situation where you're not likely to get fired, you kind of like go to sleep a little bit sleep. I like to refer to it as being playing around in the valley over there and nobody really caring that you're playing. But when you're on this, I think you are forced to perform. You're forced to stay current. And we want to stay current because we're in a profession where it behooves all of us to stay current. It behooves all of us to stay connected and networked and to give back. So you can see I'm kind of passionate about this topic, so I talk about it a lot. So I think my time is probably up, Mary Beth, for the first question, right? I don't want to talk too long because I'll go on and on.
You actually have more time, but I also wanted to give the others in the panel an opportunity to be able to discuss that same question. If you have any other comments that you wanted to add, maybe a different perspective.
One of the things I find really interesting, and I really want to kind of focus this towards people that are coming out of their MLS programs and are kind of looking at the job market, is that there are so many different kinds of strata, right? There are so many different kinds of faculty status, right? Like we have faculty status here at AU where I am in the DC area. Whereas I think at Georgetown, the librarians have staff status. They're not seen as faculty, although there are, I believe, are opportunities to kind of publish and present and be active and kind of utilizing professional development and whatnot. So I think it's incumbent upon people that are kind of leaving school and looking at the job market to be aware with the different kinds of strata that are out there in terms of status. My mother was an educator. I was certainly aware of what tenure meant. I also know I have friends, right, that are librarians that don't want to deal, right, with what it takes to kind of go up for tenure. And you don't have to, right? So I think if anything, one of the things I really want to kind of come out of this conversation is that there are multitudes, right? And we'll be talking a little bit later. I know Marcela is going to be talking about, you know, kind of identifying institutions and organizations and how they are structured. I also can say that AU, like, our status shifted, right? Our library had faculty status that was equivalent to teaching faculty. We had a provost that took that away, and we fought for years for this status we have now called continuing appointment, which functions in much of the same way. But there are so many different kinds of statuses, so many different organizations and opportunities that are out there. So I think it's really, it would be fruitful for prospective academic librarians to make themselves aware of the different kinds of statuses that are out there professionally.
And in some cases, your salaries could be higher at a place where there's academic status. I mean, that's one of the other things too. And then one of the other reasons to pursue it is there are not very many positions that allow for upward mobility within an organization. Like, everybody can't be a department head, everybody can't be an assistant director. But in places where there is academic status, you can go from a librarian 1 to a librarian 2, 3, or 4, or you can go from assistant professor to a full professor. And all of those can mean ultimately an increase in salary. So there is that side of it as well.
I agree with all the things that have been said. When you're coming out of your MLIS program, I guess, you know, at that stage, it's appropriate to try to have a sense of the kind of big picture.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and as an academic librarian, if you go into being a librarian at a college, a university, a community college, there very well may be some type of cohort system that offers you advancement. It could be tenure. It may not be called tenure, but it will offer you some type of advancement, probably because it's based on an academic model.
Mm-hmm.
And know that that is something that you will probably want to think about if you're going into academic librarianship, and that there will probably be a promotion process where you have to submit materials and have a review if you're going to advance in that type of way in an academic library. And it has a lot of colors and shades, like Derrick was saying.
I think one thing I wanted to add more to the, I guess it's when we talk about the different types of work you would do at institutions with different systems. One thing that I can say, having been on the tenure track, and I'll talk more because I've been on the tenure track at 2 different places. And that is that when you are on this type of sort of track, there is a lot of independence, which can be great, but it also means that you have to generate a lot of your own work and a lot of your own duties and what you do. And that may not be something that is for everyone, for just personality. It could be for like your life situation. So those are things also that, you know, it's important to take into account is, do I really want to have to be continually generating opportunities, or would I be happier where I have to do a little bit less of that? And I think that is something that we don't often discuss. We talk a lot about what you need to do to get tenure, but that is something that, you know, it is something that you will need to work on as someone, at least in my experience in the tenure track, is you do have to continually be creating these opportunities for yourself, and it can be exhausting sometimes. So just something to keep in mind, that those are some differences that you may encounter depending on the institution.
Oh, great comments. Thank you for your perspectives. I appreciate that. Okay, the second question is addressed to Curtis. Curtis, what is your understanding of promotion and tenure before you went through this process? Did it end up being like you expected? And what is the one thing that you wish that you knew before you started?
Okay, I'm unmuted. I just want to make sure of that. So before when I got hired at my library in 2013, my understanding was very general. And this is what I was talking about. At your level, at your stage, there's an appropriate amount of knowledge. You don't have to know everything at the beginning. I knew there was an up or out, which means you're on a time clock. And if you do not get your promotion, you have to leave and seek employment elsewhere. I knew that at the beginning. We do not have tenure at my institution. We have what it's called faculty equivalency. So, that's basically what I knew. I was going to be on a time clock. I was going to be evaluated in certain areas. I would have to leave if I did not get, and you want to know that early on. I learned other things over time, because you do have time to figure things out as you go. My library had a committee that was focused on helping librarians in our librarian cohort to prepare for promotion. This was a part of our professional development offers that librarians put together. So they offered a yearly workshop where the promotion system is discussed, where you get some help, some information, useful information. You could see the dossiers of people who have been successful in getting promotion at whatever level. I entered in an entry level position, assistant librarian. And oftentimes that's the entry level position. And in my case, you may have if you enter at an entry level, you may have to go up for promotion twice before you get either tenure or you get what they call a career level in my institution, where I don't have to go up again. So that's the sort of job security. You don't have to go up for promotion again, no more up or out, but there's still further advancement, another level. So because of the workshops, and I served on the committee, the professional development committee that prepared these workshops and information for librarians. That involvement helped me to understand the process better. By the time I went up, I had a basic understanding. You're always learning more, though. I expected this to feel like a big job the first time that I submitted my dossier to go up from assistant librarian to senior assistant, which was also up or out, but the stakes were not as high that first time. It felt like a very big job. So I knew it was going to be, and I was right. I spent a good part of my time getting my materials together that summer, because we submit in the fall. And I think all these things are common. You get a much better understanding of this is still to answer the first question, what my understanding was and how I learned. You get a much better understanding of tenure or promotion when you go through the process of submitting your dossier, right? You actually go through the whole thing. So your first promotion, if you enter at an entry-level rank, the first time you go up, which will probably not be the last time, hopefully it won't, you learn a lot by going through the process. You can't know everything. That first review is a good opportunity to learn things that will be helpful when you go up the next time. And I couldn't foresee how that was before it happened, but it ended up being very helpful. So by the time I went up the second time, where the rubber really met the road, this was the last time that I was going to go up. And if I did not get it, I would have to leave, or I would have job security. I had gone through it once, and that really helped a lot. Your first review, your requirements probably won't be as substantial the first time you go up, although it will probably feel like a big job. It will prepare you. The second time, you will be stronger because you going through it once. So know everything that you can learn appropriately before you go up. Take all the help that you can get, if there's help at your institution, or hopefully there is. But expect to learn a lot more by the time you go through the process. In terms of what I wish I had known before I went up, like I said, I thought it would be a substantial job to go up, and it was. The first time was substantial. The second time was much more substantial because I had a lot more in my dossier, which is probably what you're going to need to do if you're going up for your tenure or your career level promotion. However, the first time that I went up for promotion, I did not get a mentor specifically for the promotion process. I had a mentor my library offered mentors in our institution. I had a mentor for my early months in the library. I did not get a specific promotional mentor, which my library did offer. I would put in a word for getting mentorship formally or informally as a part of the process. I plan to do it even when I go up for full library. So because I didn't do it the second time, the second time, and I wished I had, the second time that I went up, I chose somebody in my library well before I went up who I thought would be a good person based on this person's familiarity with the system, this person's reputation within my library, and my interactions with the person. And I started working with her, a year before I was considering going up the second time. I didn't do that the first time. And I started getting a list of the things I had accomplished. I didn't do all the work, but you start keeping track of things well ahead of time. And I just met and discussed with this mentor who was an informal mentor, not a formal mentor. I said, I'd like this person. I'm going to just ask this person if she will help me. And she did. So as a result of meeting with her well before, when I was deciding when to go up, I decided I'm not going to go up the first time that I could go up. I'm going to wait. We decided it would be better for me to beef up my production in the area of publishing and research. And so I went out and looked for opportunities. And as a librarian, when you start to get involved in things, people start to ask you to do things. Yes, you do have to create opportunities, but you, as being involved in committees and national committees and things like that, people start to ask you to do things, and you can decide, well, I think this, I want to do this. This will help me to get promotion as well, and it's something I can see myself doing. So I actually didn't have to stir up a whole lot, but I did have to stir up, for publishing. So that's when I actually kept my ears open. So also the first time I went up, I was focused on the first time, the date that the dossier was due. I know I was going to spend a lot of that summer preparing, and I did, but I wasn't focused on the date by which I could give the dossier to people to have them look over it for me. So the second time I went up, I made up a much more careful calendar and built in 2 or 3 weeks ahead of time to give everything to my readers so that they could give me feedback and I could make corrections. And I didn't keep to it perfectly, but because I had that calendar, I was able to stick more closely to that and give them materials. And I don't want to, 5 people is not too many people to ask to look at a dossier. I didn't know that at first. Even though my second time, I had my people ahead of time and they looked at it, nobody caught all of my typos. But you may want to ask 5 or 6 people, and there's details about how to approach that, but ask some maybe to look at your content, your accomplishments, and others to specifically focus on typos and copy editing. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Curtis, you had a question come in the chat asking to explain what a dossier was. And also another question that was for you was whether your mentor was someone who worked internally or did not.
Okay. So yes, a dossier is kind of jargon. The dossier is your file. It's what you submit to if you have a committee, a tenure committee, a promotion committee, it's all the materials that you submit for consideration. And they may vote, and decide whether they recommend you for it or not. So in my case, it was we have 4 areas that we are judged on and are laid out in a document within my institution. Promotion document it's like a constitution. These are the 4 areas, and you submit narrative of what you've done in each area, all electronic, documentation for what you've done in each area. And that's the dossier that you submit electronically to the committee. The other question about my unofficial mentor was a librarian within my library, because in my library offered a mentor for your promotion specific. It was good and I'm not saying don't get a mentor from outside your library. all the more mentors you can have that you feel comfortable with, the better. But for my promotional process, somebody within my system who had already she'd gotten full librarianship. You know, she was known for being very organized, knew the document inside out, and was a good person. So, you know, it was a successful collab. I couldn't be more thankful to her, you know. And so when I got my promotion, I took her to lunch, gift card, you know, and you know, getting that kind of support can be a wonderful experience.
So Curtis, you've been wonderful comments are coming in, but one in particular, there are two. I don't want us to go too far before we address Mary Beth. Is it okay? One of them was this person was not a librarian, but was a library assistant and was interested in knowing how they might go about seeking promotion. But I think what we're saying, the foundation of what we're saying, it can go across job types, understanding what is required where you work to be successful or to move up or to go up for promotion, right? So I think that's what everybody is saying. Understand the organization where you work, understand what's required. So if it is written, as Curtis brought up in his, how it was detailed, the 4 areas that he needed to work on or to demonstrate his performance within, a conversation with a supervisor if you're interested in promotion and there's not a clear document that's laid out, then a conversation with your supervisor around how might I position myself for the next available thing. So I just wanted to touch on that. And I think somebody else had a question around you can't serve on a promotion and tenure committee until you have tenure, and that is mostly the case at a lot of places. At some places you can, but at some places you cannot, because you can't, they would say you can't judge a thing unless you've gone through the thing yourself. But either way, you can always find someone at another institution and ask if you could see documentation that they have, or somebody at your own. We're going to get into some of that a little later, I think. So I'll hush now and let the next question come forward.
Before we do that, I just want to go back to the dossier, the question about the dossier. So you will hear all of us talk about different things. My institution calls it a dossier. Some institutions will call it your tenure packet or your promotion packet. Where I used to work before, we submitted binders. So we would call it like, oh, your tenure binder. So just know that like the names will be different and we may all be like talking about something like that, but we're always talking about what you're expected to submit, and always it will be very different. As I said, I've been in places where you had to do a physical binder. Where I work right now, it used to be a USB, but with COVID, we just did it electronically. So just know that if we say all of those words, like we just mean the documentation that we are expected to submit.
So Curtis, did you get that last question they asked of you? They wanted to know what the 4 areas were at your place.
Well, what I thought I was going to do would talk about that maybe during our Q&A, okay, so we could
just say, hold on.
I will talk about that, but I'll just reiterate what Wanda said. Find out where you work, because that's the most important thing you need to know.
Absolutely right. Spot on. Okay, let's move on to question number 3. This one is from Marcela. Promotion and tenure processes look very different at various institutions. Nice little segue into this next thing here. Can you share how you came to make sense of the process and the culture, both official and the hidden culture, at your institution?
Yeah, so I made a lot of notes because I wanted to make sure that I remembered everything I wanted to say. So I mentioned before, I've been on the tenure track at 2 institutions. If you have any questions about leaving a tenure track position, just put them in there and I'm happy to answer them at the end or when we do the Q&A. But I used to work at a small teaching institution in Massachusetts. And then I got my job at McGill. And that was a huge change because even though both of them were tenure track, positions, the requirements were very different. McGill is a Research 1 institution. It's one of the top universities in the world. So that meant that the requirements were next level. I've seen some questions on the chat about committees. I can tell you that I have a library committee, a university committee. We have external evaluators. So everything you can think of, we have it. It's a 6-year process. It's a very long process. But the requirements were very different. So even for me coming from a tenure track position, whatever I thought I was supposed to do, I was wrong. Or there were a lot of things that I didn't know, or the expectations were a lot higher. And one of the things that you're going to find a lot, especially when you're at an institution where you have a tenure process, where you're kind of lumped together with professors, is that whenever the university or your union, or if you have an association like I do at my institution for academic staff, what you're going to find is that those tend to skew a lot towards professors, and librarians tend to be sometimes a bit of an afterthought when it comes to like those big institutional sessions or things like that. So, I knew from the get-go that, any answers I'm going to get, they have to come from the library, because the institution, the university as a whole, those trainings are just not as good for me. And then at the library, we did have a little bit of, training. I had conversations during my interview process, and even between the interview process and those first meetings that I had when I first started, there were discrepancies on the information I was given. And on top of that, one of the things that I find that make this process hard sometimes is that there's a lot of ambiguity, because especially if you are at an institution with tenure, it's like you have academic freedom. You can do whatever you want. It's like, can I? So there's a lot of ambiguity in like what things mean. We talk a lot about when we at my institution, we need external evaluators, for example, and you're supposed to choose them from comparable institutions. Now, what is a comparable institution is very different to a lot of people. And I can't even tell you right now, after going through the process, I'm currently in tenure limbo. So I've submitted my packet, but I'm still kind of waiting. So what that means, what comparable means, is very different to a lot of different people. And you kind of have to figure that on your own. And choosing those external evaluators because of that was really hard. we're going to share a document. Thank you. Someone already shared it. Someone had asked before how to choose or how to find out external evaluators, or how to find out which institutions have tenure or tenure-like systems. And we put a link on the chat that actually has a wonderful resource that has a lot of universities listed there and what kind of employment librarians have. So that's something that I used. And I also use the ARL rankings because my institution is an ARL member. So I was able to access those rankings and kind of choose people who were at our level or above. That's what my university wanted. But it was very ambiguous. Like it wasn't that the university gave me a list that said, hey, these are the people you can choose from or the institutions you can choose from. And it's also very subjective because what you think, it might not be what someone else thinks. Committees change, and what the committee wants may be different according to the membership of that committee. So I was at a point where it's like, okay, so I have all this information, but it's just not enough. And what I did find that was extremely useful, and Curtis touched upon this, and Wanda touched upon this, and Derrick, I'm sure, will too, which is talk to people. So I actually made a list of some people that I talked to. Actually, before I say that, I'm going to add one more thing that I want you to do, and you can do this before you get hired, which is read union contracts or bylaws or anything that's available on a university's website. And those things should be available for the public for you to see. So I, just check if you have a union contract, the collective agreement, you want to take a look at that. If your union institution has like their bylaws or sometimes called regulations regarding tenure, usually those are front facing. Make sure that you read them because that will give you some information. And then, yes, talk to people. So people that I talk to that really help me. My supervisor, I was extremely lucky to have a supervisor that was very supportive in this process and that who wanted me to get tenure. And that meant a couple of conversations about where things were going or if I was in doubt. And I know we got this question on our original like sign up sheet that talked about what could supervisors do. So what I can tell you that was really helpful for me in those supervisor meetings were check-ins where it didn't feel like I was listing everything what I was doing, but it felt like a conversation about what I was doing, planning on doing, but also my supervisor is suggesting things. Or he kept like an eye for opportunities and be like, hey, you know, have you seen this? I think actually you could be a really good fit for this, whether it was a service opportunity. It took me a long time to write my first article and he pushed me to do it. So those are things that really helped me kind of get there and get an idea of like, okay, this is what the university is expecting of me. And I have this person in my corner who is helping me get there and helping me sort of navigate this. I also talked to people who did a similar job to mine. So I actually, like when I first started at McGill, I was not covering, but like I was entering because there was someone who was going on mat leave. She was like 9 months pregnant when I started. And after a year, because we're in Canada, so we have a year. So she came back and I was able to look at her documentation because she had done my job before. So people who do things are similar to yours, and especially like I asked for dossiers. I just went and was like, hey, would you mind sharing your dossier with me? And nobody said no. Now, people are weird and some people may say no, you know, and we all have different, but everyone that I ever asked said yes. I also talked to people who I know did well and who were willing to show me their reports. So for example, one person that I know, she had gotten this really nice comment about how she had hit all the major information literacy conferences. And I thought, you know what, that is a really good comment. And that's something I want for myself. And I want to make sure that I had to me are the 3 top information literacy conferences. I also talked to people who had been in the library tenure or reappointment committee, because they may have some good advice. And because you can also ask them, hey, do you remember reading a good dossier? Can you tell me someone who you think I should ask for to see their dossier? And again, they were happy to say, oh, hey, you may want to talk to this person. And then I asked for their dossiers and I got it. And the last one I want to add is if there are people in your committee that you know that they're going to be there, and this is like a tricky thing because there's only so much advice they can give you. But I'll give you an example of one time that was useful to me, which was my university has a bit of a template to kind of, you know, go over, like to submit. You don't have to follow it, but like it's there if you want it. And there was a point in there that in my reappointment dossier I had removed because I felt like it makes no sense for me to have that. However, when I brought it up again with the chair of the tenure committee, she really wanted me to have it there. So you know what? You bet I put it in there, because even if it's just like saying, hey, as stated in all these other points, I actually have done this. But hey, if they wanted me to put that in there, I did put it in there. And really, you know, that was really helpful to me. Those conversations also told me how to write things. So I'm an immigrant. I'm originally a Spanish speaker. I come from a country where you can say a lot without giving a lot of context, which is how I write. It's not how people were expecting me to write. So having those conversations really allowed me to be like, oh, I can't expect them to understand what's implicit in this sentence. I really need to spell it out. So all those things were really, really important. And I want to say one more thing is, if you are not a liaison or a subject librarian, this may be key for you to do. This conversations may be key, because just like I said, university-wide trainings for tenure usually skew for professors. Usually, in my experience, internal library examples and things like that tend to skew very much liaison or subject librarian. So if you are a cataloger or if you are in access services or anything like that, you may actually not have as many examples, and they may have not thought of you when they did that template. So talking to people who have gone through that, going to people who have your same job or a similar job will be really helpful in getting those like details that you're just not getting, because again, we have academic freedom. No one's telling you how to do it, but there's actually kind of a way to do it.
Thank you. That was a fabulous answer. And I agree with you. The dossier is no time to be humble. Okay, does anybody else, before we move on to the next question, have any other comments that they wanted to add to Marcela's answer?
One thing, somebody put it in the comment section that said that they didn't have a lot of confidence in their writing, so they had somebody review it. I would say that that's an important thing. It's to understand what your strengths and weaknesses are and not be ashamed to say, would you look over this and read it prior to that? Because it's a part of growth. Personal growth is understanding what your strengths and weaknesses are and how to sell yourself in a limited, like nobody wants to read 30 pages, right? And so how do you sell yourself in the fewest amount of pages that gives the most detailed information or the most relevant information? So, and that's hard because a lot of people in our profession are kind of humble and kind of shy. And so it's really hard to like toot your horn, but this process kind of forces you to first examine yourself and be able to present yourself in a way that somebody's going to find it acceptable.
And one thing I want to add is, which I wish I had, which is find out what's important at your institution. And when I say what's important is, I know for me, where I'm at right now, impact is very important. So the impact that I do is very important. So I want to make sure that I packed that dossier with numbers, with examples, with things that I could point out and say, hey, 1,000 people benefited from this thing that I did. And I knew that that was important for me, for my context. So finding out what's important, what is valued is extremely key to sort of getting a nice dossier out. I'm sorry, I just saw that there is someone asking, what if you are at a small institution and there is not someone else in your position, which yes, can definitely happen. It could also happen when I started my first tenure track position. I was the first hire in 6 years. So there was no one who was going through even like similar thing as I was going through. And that one can be really challenging. But I think you can still benefit from those conversations with your colleagues of what they did, and you can just apply it to yourself. And also, you know, we talked about reaching out outside if you need to, finding through ACRL, for example, finding a mentor, or through committee work, and getting in there. And then for me, having people read my stuff was key because, again, no, I'm not like a native English speaker, so I make mistakes. And especially like I tend to write really long sentences sometimes, because in Spanish we just write really long sentences. So having someone come and be like, no, you can say this, you can say this way, was really useful to me to kind of have, even if it's like a friend. And sometimes, especially if you have a library committee, not a library, but a university committee that's going to be reading it. It's good to have a non-librarian read your stuff, because you will have non-librarians read your stuff. So sometimes you have to explain what a LibGuide is, because if you just say a LibGuide, they're not going to understand what it is.
It was suggested that I address the question about being, I think it's following up on the question that Marcela was talking on, of maybe being in a job that is not as well represented within your library, things being skewed toward liaison librarians. And I'm in special collections, and there are a lot fewer of us than there are in, in our reference and instructional services department. However, our tenure document and the areas are the same. It's the same structure for everybody. And I didn't really sort of feel a lot of anxiety about that specific issue. But what I did do was I certainly looked at the dossier of one or more people who worked in my unit to see what, what this person did. And a lot of it is just the people that you know, how comfortable you feel with those people. So, I would second keeping that in mind. And if you're a cataloger, reaching out to other catalogers or people who do a similar type of work is a good idea. Because come to think of it, I have no idea. I don't know that I've seen a cataloger's dossier. You don't hire as many of them as often, and so I don't even know. I wouldn't even know quite what that looks like, So it's a good question. So special collections are a little closer to reference and library liaisons, but it's a good one.
Thank you for those great insights. Okay, the next question is for Derrick. At least initially, everyone can chime in. We have discussed a bit about the process, about how you approach identifying what work you would do to be successful when you went up for promotion. How did you determine what was required and what was going to be valued at your institution? And how do you say no?
Ooh. One of the things I think about having started my job at AU and thinking about that clock, right? Like, at some point you're going to have these kind of reappointment things that come up, kind of like Curtis's situation, before you have that big, right? The big dun-da-da-da tenure file or dossier. And so I knew even as I got started at AU, right? Like that I was going to have to be on committees, right? To be active in the association, to, really flex into professional development. So that was part of it. I also had, these like angels, like looking out for me, right? Like people from ALA that I was appointed to committees, right? So that there were people that were aware of this kind of landscape and knew these processes that were in place, right? That I was going to be kind of going up through these strata. And so it was a combination of me being proactive about finding things to do, and being kind of well versed in, at AU, it's your primary responsibilities, it's service to both the university and to the profession. And there's another one, I don't know what it is, but I'm sure I did it. And so it was a lot. And I think one of the things that I think about, certainly through this lens of EDI, is that even though I'm not a first generation student, right, but I grew up in Southeast San Diego, right, which certainly was challenging. And I was aware certainly of my race, right, in a profession that is largely white and largely female. I identify as LGBTQ, right? So there are all these things that for me were not necessarily obstacles. I didn't think that these were going to be issues, but I'm certainly aware of how identity plays out. I am aware of obviously racism, right? I'm aware of microaggressions. I am aware of whiteness as a construct, and something that we see overwhelmingly in the profession as well as in higher education. And so I felt like I was doing my due diligence, right? Like I was presenting, I was being invited to conferences. At this point, I was even like keynoting when I got to, the dossier or file portion of my career. But I was also aware that, of people that had, not necessarily librarians, but the people at our institution who had submitted tenure files, teaching tenure files, and were denied, were largely women and largely women of color. And there had been lawsuits, right? This is, we talk about the good, the bad, the ugly. This is the ugly. And people suing the organization and stuff being talked about in the Chronicle and in the higher ed. And even though I felt like I had done my part and had gone above and beyond, that it was still a little scary. It was a little intimidating, right? Like, I know what the profession looks like and it doesn't look like me. And uh it was a lot to kind of have to deal with at the time. One of the things that I didn't think about until later, and I saw this, um, is that when I was hired, and I think AU was really good about this, is that the people that they bring in for, you're one of the final three candidates or whatever, and they're bringing you in and you're doing your all day interviews, is that I don't think that they bring in people that they don't want for the long haul. And so when you finally get offered that job and they bring you in and you're getting whatever your password and your laptop issued to you that first day, that they want you. And so I felt even then that there was this, that they're working in this kind of vein of governance, right? Like, we're going to kind of bring in and usher you into library governance, and we're going to talk about the tenure process, or for us, continuing appointment at the time, because we want you here. And so in many ways, I had really unnecessarily probably scared myself, and that the people, my supervisor, right, and the head of our unit and our UL, like, they wanted me. And I don't know if I saw it that way. And it was a struggle. I tell people to get yourself a squad, right? Get you people that you can turn to, that you can text at 2 o'clock in the morning, and you stress eat mozzarella sticks and you're pulling your hair out, right? And you're trying to get the file done. People who know the profession, right? People who know dossiers, and people who don't know a dossier from jump, right? People that are going to be your support squad to kind of get you through those tough times. Your old people from, back home, right? That can understand what you're talking about. But also the people that know, like, oh, you know what? You might want to word this way, right? Have as many people put eyes on your dossier or your file as you can. Um, so I felt like I really had this kind of wide ranging, like, salad bar, right, of things that I had done to put forth a file that showed that I had done great, in my primary responsibilities, that I had done great service, that I'd been active in the profession. For me, again, as someone who looks like me and loves like me, I certainly think about the marginalized student, right? The underrepresented student. And I think that my passion to those demographics, right? Those types of students, showed. I really do love working with students, and it's my favorite thing to do. And I think that when you are passionate about that, for me, everything else was kind of, my fingerprints were all over everything else because of my focus on students and students' access to information and learning how to conduct research and getting through. Like, if you get into our institution, right, and you are admitted, I want to make sure that in 4 years you're graduating. So I'm going to do everything in my power to get you to graduation day, even as a first year student who's fighting with your roommate who doesn't clean up after themselves, right? So if you come to me and you're complaining about, this term paper, and you can't focus because your roommate is rushing this fraternity or sorority and is making you crazy, that's impacting your education, right? So I feel like all the things that I did, were in that vein to kind of get the student to where they needed to be. And so that's just, I don't know if that does that even answer the question? Yeah, I'll hush.
I think that as you grow into either any kind of either a tenure track position or a position where you're working towards continuing appointment or promotion, I think that, or at least personally, I think when they hired me, they thought I was going to be very quiet, and that did not happen. And I think you start getting more comfortable and you start working and you realize, like, you know what, I'm going to put a link to a book that I read which said, if you're doing everything well, you can not do something great and you'll be fine. And I think like putting that into perspective that, hey, if I'm hitting everything I need to be hitting, I'm probably exceeding it, then I can give myself a little bit of a break. And for me, it had to happen because I made myself sick. So I had to say, you know what? I need to, for example, I was working a lot of evenings between committees and the work that we have to do and teaching and all that. And I said, well, I cannot do the teaching, that's my job. I cannot do reference because that's my job, but I can choose not to continue being part of this association in this level because it's just not good for me at the time. So I think as you get more comfortable, and as Derrick said, like they hired you because they wanted you to succeed. They don't want to have to hire someone else and spend the money on someone else when they have you in already. Especially someone like, if they moved you for some reason, like, yes, they don't want to spend, like, they don't want to have to do all of that again. So it's important to know that, yes, they're hiring you because they do want you to succeed. And obviously, again, I said before, people are weird. So there are places where that may not be the case. But when you kind of think about that and you think about, okay, like this is my job, I want to do it great. I'm also a person that has needs and I need to address them. Those decisions and the saying no becomes more comfortable. Also, as you build a body of work that you can rely on, you can say like, you can't say that I don't do stuff, but I can say that, hey, at this time, this is not a great choice for me. And again, I think that we all have different identities that play into this. I present as a white woman, and that affords me with a lot of privilege. And I know that. But we can really, there are small things that if you're doing the work and you are in a place that is supportive, you can feel more comfortable. And also as you focus more on a specific thing, yeah, you're going to focus on that and that will be your thing. So for me, for example, that is digital scholarship. That's my thing. So I can kind of like make those choices, but definitely I would say, don't be afraid of saying no if you don't think that's a good choice for you. I made bad choices and I've learned from them, and that allowed me to be like, I don't think that's good for me. But I'll tell you one where I said no that I think will be funny. Very, very early on, like maybe like 2 months in, my boss comes to me and he's like, we want you to organize pet therapy, dogs. So I have a pretty bad dog phobia. So it's like, I can't do that. I'm sorry, I just can't do that. It's like mentally that is not good for me. So, if it's just not good for you, just think about how, you do have a body of work and you do have an institution that hopefully wants you to succeed.
I also wanted to add that you you can rehearse every year, because every year you need to be writing about what you accomplished that year. And if you know that there are 4 areas, those are probably the same 4 areas you're going to be evaluated on a yearly basis. So if you take the opportunity to look back retrospectively for your year, write it up. It makes writing that document 4 years down the road a lot easier, because you've got 4 individual things that have outlined everything you accomplished. But also it allows you to look back and say, well, last year I didn't focus as much on this area, so I really need to focus a little bit more on that area. So I think that's a way of preparing yourself every year as you go through it.
I definitely agree with that point. And the person who worked with me as a mentor for my promotion put that bug in my ear about using our annual appraisal process, which actually did not have the same criteria as our promotion. But I started using it to very carefully document much more than I would have otherwise what I was doing in order to use that information. Because when you go up, you're going to have a lot of information to review and sift through, and that's one way of helping you to keep track of what you've done. Another point I'd like to touch on in terms of saying no, which is also related to the question that Paige just asked of Derrick and the rest of us about being your authentic self, or mentoring people to be your authentic self. what I've learned through the stresses and discoveries of going up for promotion is that within the profession, there are opportunities to get involved in communities that reflect your interest and your values and that feel welcoming to you. And you can start sort of part of showing up as your authentic self is deciding what things you want to do that reflect who you are and your values. And so I started to be involved in my national organization, RBMS. They were welcoming, and I started small. You know, I gave them some ideas at the first meeting that I went to around diversity. They invited me to continue, and it sort of grew over time with me seeing how I thought I could best contribute. And so it felt kind of like a natural unfolding because there was this community that was open, you know, and so I didn't have to say no a lot. And another of community that I was involved with, the colored conventions, reflected my values. And you may ask to do things if you're a part of a committee or an organization. And when you get asked, you think, do I want to do this? One, can I see myself doing this? Two, and is this going to help me in my promotion? Because in one of my communities, like the Color Conventions Project, they're asking you to write. I love the Color Conventions. Yes, I'm going to write. And thank you for giving me my first, concrete thing that's going to go toward my, my research. So it's a give and take, But honestly, I did not say no a whole lot. The farther along especially when you don't know, you're going to need to do a lot. Things that I could see myself doing, I said yes to. And I'm saying no more now. I started saying no after I got my first promotion. I started to think more carefully about it. And they're telling me, say no sometimes, it's okay. The longer you go, you find yourself, you discover who you are. And you kind of have the insight to say yes, to say no, and to know what that means in terms of your promotion and your ultimate goals.
I'm going to speak from the director's chair and asking people, and you're saying no. So I'm going to suggest to Marcela that you could have come back to your director and said, I'm happy to co-lead in this event. I will need a strong co-leader with me because I have a dog phobia. All right. And so then you're not saying no, because what I'm trying to get my staff here to do is to not think about the no, but to think about how you can get to yes and everybody be a winner. So the winner would have been that you could have still done all the research, done everything else, and asked your supervisor for a strong co-lead because you have a dog phobia. That's a way of saying, it's a way of saying no, but it's also a way of saying yes. Getting to yes is like I like to do, is how do we get to yes? It's because as a director and as a member of my staff, you don't know which thing is the thing that I'm counting on you to do that you're saying no, a flat out, straight out no, is going to make it difficult for me to ask you again the next time. I just wanted to say that. So I'll just sit back in my chair now. Okay. Yes, Derrick.
Also, I know I want to respond to Ada saying no, and also I know that Paige had a question in the chat that Curtis addressed. It took my supervisor coming to me to tell me to say no to stuff in the sense, and because I was at risk of really kind of burning myself out, and I was like trying to do all of the things and trying to do all of the things well. And they were like, we want you here for the long haul, right? So they said that you don't have to submit this book chapter and be on this chair, chair this committee and do this other thing. So they were good about, and we had regular check-ins, right? So I was like, oh, well, I'm doing this and I got offered to do this and I had this other thing come out and I'm on this committee and I'm doing this panel. So they were really good about it, but you also need to be doing your job, right? Like you also need to, buy books, right? And teach your classes and settle down a little bit. And so I do appreciate that kind of insight on behalf of my supervisor. In terms of my identity and thinking about other kind of marginalized identities, I'm lucky, right, at AU because they knew who they were getting right at that interview, right? Like I am who I am. I remember talking about like Rihanna in teaching whatever thing for my, like your sample teaching, and I was talking about Rihanna and I had to do a whole thing on social media. I work in this with the School of Communication, so I was talking about social media and talking about celebrities using social media, and it was very sassy, right, and very gay. It was very, they knew who they were getting, right? And so I am lucky, and I'm also like, I'm old, right? Like I went back to library school at 37. And so I was not trying to retreat into nobody's closet. I was not trying to be some safe, whatever person. I'm a good time. I'll say that I'm fun, right? But I am who I am. And so I am, and I know people who don't have that luxury, right, at other institutions. I know librarians who aren't lucky to have, dismantling whiteness be your research project, right? Like that's something that I'm working hard talking about, the prevalence of whiteness in our profession, how we can open the pathways for new librarians and established librarians to be their whole selves. And I know that that is shunned, right, at other institutions. It's too hot, and I know that I can come in spicy. And so I know that it is a luxury at my institution to be my whole self and to bring that to the library and to bring that to the School of Communication. And so I don't block that blessing. I absolutely realize that that's not the case for everybody.
And one thing I wanted to add is if you're not there yet, if you don't feel safe to say no, if you don't think you can yet, boundary setting is a skill that most of us are still learning. Boundary setting, some of us may be better at our jobs, but have a harder time doing it with our families. But boundary setting, and it's something that we continuously have to do because life changes and situations change. So if you're not there yet, don't feel like, oh, I'm doing something wrong, or I should be able to say this. If you don't feel safe to do it, then wait until you feel safe to do it. If you feel like this is not the time, your gut tells you this is not the time, then you know what? Honor that feeling, that discomfort that you're feeling. And sometimes that discomfort is all in our heads, but sometimes it's real. Like your mind is trying to protect you of something. Sorry, I have a lot of therapy in my life. But think about that. I don't want you to leave this conversation thinking like, oh, like I should be saying no and like I'm not good because I'm not able to say no. This is a process, and like we say with everything, I think that we teach in librarianship, the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And your instincts just get better at picking up when it's a good time and when it's not a good time. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear, and that we were not implying that you should be saying no regardless of how you feel.
Y'all, go ahead, Curtis.
Yeah, I also, with regard to that, because sometimes you may not know what to do in a situation. Derrick's suggestion of having a squad or trying to, before you get to that point, as you're entering the profession now, try to look out for people who you sort of feel sort of comfortable with. You can approach them and within your institution, without, so that when something happens, you have an idea of who you may approach to try to talk about it and get advice about it when you don't know. This person's coming at me, what should I do? And within your institution, you may be lucky enough to feel that there are people like that, and it takes some time to get to know people, but go to lunch with folk. They invite you to lunch, go to lunch. You're new, nobody's inviting you, which happened to me, except for the Black librarians. They're the only ones that consciously reach out to other people, start to establish relationships, and things build from there. so that when you get up to something that may feel like a crisis, you have someone that you can go to and get concrete advice. Your supervisor may or may not be that person. You know, you may need to say, well, my supervisor is not doing it. Let me see who else I can go to and ask concrete questions.
So I'm not on the panel, y'all. Hi, I'm Maisha, but I love to add my 2 cents. So I just want to really quickly say, this idea of what to say no to, has me really thinking about, the kind of theoretical purpose of this whole thing. Like, it's really easy when you're in it, and I just submitted my dossier not long ago. It's really easy when you're in the middle of it to feel like whatever you're saying yes to is so you can get promotion. And of course, we know that the purpose of this promotion process is not to theoretically force you or get you to do more than you already would be doing, right? This is about documenting the work you're doing and your success. So I want to kind of inspire everyone to really spend time reflecting on your own goals, on your own vision for your career, right? What is it that you want to accomplish? If it's getting the kids to love Rihanna, or if it's getting bringing the Black students a new level of connection to the library, whatever it is, right? Have that be what guides you, and the documenting your work, that's where your mentor can help you out. That's where everyone can help you prepare for the dossier part. But the what you're going to do should really come from you, right? It should come from what you believe in, and in the places that you feel like your talents and your interests can really serve whatever it is you believe in. So I just wanted to share that 2 cents. I think we forget it. Mary Beth, we have more questions, I think.
Wow, that was a really good answer. And I think you're spot on, that it's really important to be able to sort of be true to yourself. So the brave words. So we do have one more question for the whole panel, but we've only got 18 minutes left in the time. Do you want to switch to what has been suggested in the chat? Because the last question is actually related to identities and how you navigated it. And it seems like we've been touching on that quite a lot already.
Yeah.
So,
So let's see. I mean, I think that one of the questions that came in the chat was about that I would really love for us to connect to is, how do mentor colleagues support people being their authentic selves? And if there's any concrete advice for us as we support our colleagues. And then there's a really interesting question about, I'm asking both to see what y'all bite on. There's a really interesting question about the idea of transferring institutions, changing jobs in the middle of the process. I just want to know if anyone has any experience with that or have heard how that works. How do you ensure that you either maintain your status, take it with you, leap ahead? you don't take an L when you make a move. I see Marcela, you had your hand up.
So I mentioned at the beginning that I did switch jobs. I had a tenure track position, and then I went to another tenure track position. And I've known people who have done it, and it all depends on where you're coming from and where you're going. Because I can tell you that where I was before, even if I had been tenured where I work right now, they would not have taken it. Like, I would have had to start the process again. Because again, we're talking about those comparables. But I do know that if I do get tenure, and just for if my bosses ever see this, I'm not planning on leaving McGill. I am not, but I know that once I have tenure from McGill, I can easily move wherever I want with tenure. And that just has to do with your institution and rankings and things like that. What I can say is, it's something that you can always ask about. They may say no. In my case, I didn't ask because I knew it just wasn't going to happen. And for personal reasons, I really just wanted to get back to Canada. So for me, it was starting again, starting over. But I do know that if I were to change right now, I would be like, hey, I have tenure from McGill. What are we going to do about this? Sometimes you kind of start mid-process. So that means that if you're moving from comparable institutions, and you did maybe 3 years at one and the other one still has 3 years, you would enter as a reappointed librarian. and then move on to, tenure like within the 3 years, which is not always the best thing, I have to say, because you are missing that learning process that Curtis talked about when it comes to kind of learning how to do your dossier and then like doing it again when you kind of go for your second promotion. So it is definitely doable. For me, it made sense. I think that if you had asked me if I had been in the same situation maybe last year, would I have moved? No, because like I knew that stugging it out would have been better for me, because once I get past that tenure threshold, things are very different. But these are conversations that you can always have, but you do have to know that it will always depend on where you're coming from and where you're going, whether they would be willing to acknowledge that or not. And yeah, I think that's, I don't know if there are any other questions, but that has been my experience.
Anyone else have thoughts on that topic?
I think it's negotiable, right? Like I think about where I am now, like career-wise. Like I've been a librarian now for 11 years, right? I've earned my appointment. I've been promoted to associate, and frankly, bless her heart, my supervisor's like, let's talk about going up for full. And I'm like, child, if you don't sit down, like, let me get through this pandemic. Like, you're doing a whole lot right now. But I do think about the work that I've done and the work that I'm proud of, right? Like I'm on this panel for a reason, right? Because I've made a name for myself in this profession. And I think that if I chose to leave, and I'm not planning on it, and knock, Marcela, right? Like I like AU, I like my job, I like what I do, I like the opportunity for growth. But I also feel, and I didn't wake up with this Kanye West level of self-esteem, right? Like I had to work to get here, right? But I'm proud of the work that I do. And I think that if I decided to go, or an opportunity presented itself, that I would absolutely barter in the opportunity to come in at this rank with this level and with this record of work behind me. That is to say, there are a lot of institutions that have done away, right, with the process altogether. And that there are librarians that may not even have faculty stat, so it's a whole, again, it depends on where you go, like Marcela said. But I also think that I've worked really hard to get here, and I'm proud of the work that I've done. I'm proud to, formally or informally mentor to certainly, up and coming librarians of color, certainly, that are making their way in this profession. And if I can be a resource, if I can be a mentor, if I can be helpful, because so many people have done that to me, yeah, no, it's there. But I think that I would absolutely, that would be up for conversation in that all-day interview.
All right, so I'm looking, a question just came in. Yeah, someone said, can you ask that in the interview? Like, you have tenure from a former institution, would they accept it or not? Yeah, that's definitely a conversation to have really early in the process, right? Especially if you've earned that tenure. Thank you, Justine. Okay, so we only have a few minutes.
Would you ask it early in the interview, or would you ask it later in the interview? So like, you asked it round 1, or do you ask it round 2 or 3? Because you want to save it as a bargaining chip, right? The reason I say that is, okay, you want to sell them on you first. Hey, I want her, right? I want her. So then she comes back with, well, at my institution, I'm tenured. What can you do? Well, I already want you, but if you ask me early on and I haven't made my mind up about you, I'm probably going to say, well, we don't even have faculty status here. So, you might not even want to bother to do interview part 1, but I'm hoping I can sell you on me and you're going to sell me on you. And then I might have to go to the provost and say, I have a young lady, I just have to have her. She'd be such a great asset to this campus. Is there any way we can give her something? So when I came here from Wake Forest, I had, what did I have? I was senior librarian and was on a 7-year contract, right? So I came here where I didn't have anything because they don't have faculty status. But what I was able to negotiate because of that was like, okay, here's a 3-year thing that should you not be here beyond, the full 3 years, we're going to pay you the 3 years. So that was my negotiating point. But I didn't ask for that until I knew they wanted. I wanted to make sure they wanted me first. And so I would just say, everything you're saying is right. But I think you always want to be careful about timing and things too. You want to sell yourself first. But Maisha and Derrick both, and Curtis, all of you have displayed great passion. And I think this is the thing that makes me so proud of our profession, is because of people just like you all here. Mary Beth pulled everybody together to talk about this topic, but it's the passion that you all have shown. And that passion is what moves our association forward. And so what we want to do to all those LIS school students out there is to say, if this profession is something you are passionate about, then come on aboard, because this is the right place for you to be. And if you're not so sure, then you really want to think about it, because this is a place where we want to leave people better off than the way we found them. And that's our colleagues, that's up, that's down, that's everywhere we are. Oh boy, I have to shut up. Mary Beth, ring the bell. Ring the bell.
Curtis, go ahead.
Ring the bell.
Could I just jump in here?
Yes, please.
I totally, amen what Wanda said. The communities, the networks within this profession. If you're a person of color, but I'm not limiting it to that, but in terms of the identities, I sought out programs starting in library school with Spectrum Scholars, ARL Diversity Scholars, that were calling out to people of color. And that's where I got the spark of passion, because I saw communities of people, and when you meet folk early on who are farther along, and you can tell they want to see you in the profession. And that made such a world of difference early on for me. Oh, this is how you get a job. You go, you meet these people, you do your part, but then you network. But I'm going to keep it real and say that, being on a time clock, a tenure or promotion, there's some things that I would not have done probably if I had not known I'm going up for a promotion. This area over here, I need to write while I'm trying to do my job. And to answer the question that was asked before, the 4 areas, because some people said they have 3 at their university. We have 4. Our 4 areas are: 1, your job description. How are you doing your job duties? Number 2 is professional development, we call it. But our professional, we sort of divide service sort of into 2. So your job, number 1. 2, basically it's your service in community, professional development, your national ALA, RBMS. In our culture, a lot of it is how you get involved at the national level. You're doing presentations, you're putting together panels, serving on committees, chairing committees, whatever it may be, with increasing levels of leadership as you go up. That's 2. Number 3 is the research, whatever form your research or creative activity take. You could write a novel and get it published. That would be, and number 4 is our community service in our community and at our university and in our library. So those are the areas. But some of those things I would not have done, I'm telling you. But by the time I got my second promotion, you realize that it has helped you to do more, to know more people, to have a sense of who you are, what you like, what you don't like. And you really have grown because of that pressure. And, so that's where thinking about what you want to do, whether or not you can say no. If you can say no or yes, think about why, you know what I'm saying, early on, and ask people, can I do this? Do I see myself in this? And that's how you kind of touch your passion. It makes it a little bit easier to negotiate and navigate, even if you wouldn't do it otherwise. You may be glad you did later. Or you say, I don't want to do this again. This is not me, ain't my calling. I started that in library school. I did, I'm not an archivist. I did the archival internship. I don't even do all this with my own papers. It's not meant for me to be an archivist. And I think we're all happier because of that. Now I know more who I am professionally, and it takes time. Give it time.
Great, thank you. We're down to 5 minutes now, maybe even a little bit less. I was gonna say final thoughts from the group, but maybe just from, I'll leave some space for Derrick and Marcela. Any last comments or thoughts?
Be kind to yourself. That's all. Try to be kind to yourself. And when you're feeling weak, life for me ain't been no crystal stair, call on your people.
Agreed. No, that's absolutely, the number one is to look out for yourself. And I feel like I had all my ducks in a row. I felt that I had gone above and beyond and that I had everything lined up. And when I was actually, that probably, and I worked on my dossier for a whole semester, but that last week where I'm fine tuning and getting my stuff photocopied and making the PDFs, like I just saw myself, aggroed. And so get you some people who are going to there you, right? Pat you on there. Let's go get you a cheeseburger. It's going to be okay, baby. Get you some people that are going to support you and love you unconditionally and regardless.
And I think it's also important to remember, I mean, this is tough because it's a process that you go through alone, because at the end of the day, it's your contributions that, it's that packet that you wrote with the things that you do that gets evaluated. But you are not alone. There are hopefully people at your institution who have your back, who want you to do well. Again, like it's not like the best choice for the institution to have to replace people every 3 years or 6 years or whatever it is. Like it's not good for them. So you're not alone, and that you do have agency. And I think like we see it as like, oh, it's me against this institution and like for like, battle royale. But there are places where you can help. If you have a union, if you have we have an association, but like if you have something like that, know that they are there to have your back. You have your squad, build your squad, even if it's just like a friend that you can look and say like, I'm not crazy, right? Like that was messed up, right? Even if it's someone that you can just be like, yeah, that was strange. That's fine. Like that will really build, even though it's a process that we go through alone, it really helps to have people working with you that can help you and support you. I was very lucky to have a tenure buddy, which is someone who started the same day I started in my office. So we really went through the entire process together. Not everyone gets that, but if you can have a group of people that can help you navigate this, you will do better. And just remember, you're not alone, and you do have more agency than sometimes academia makes us believe. So just know that like there are, like, you get denied, you have a union or an association that can help you fight that. But you're not going to get denied. You'll be fine. Don't worry about it. And the last thing I want to say is, a lot of people think like, oh, like once I'm done, if I get tenure, I'm done. I'm not. And the truth is, like, we're all still doing, well, I'm still in tenure limbo, but we're still all doing things. Because it's just like you get to choose the things that you really like, that you learn through the entire tenure process of maybe trying things that you liked and not like so much. So just wanted to share that.
All right, that was a really excellent program, you guys. I learned so much, and I've been in many conversations with you. So every time we speak, I learn more. But I wanted to be able to hand it over to Allison now. Do you want to sort of close us out, Allison?
Sure. I'll go ahead and stop the recording. I just want to thank the panelists and the presenters and, of course, the attendees.
I don't know.